Sunday on C-SPAN.
I'm here with Vali Nasr, Professor of International Studies at Tufts University, and author of a new book, Forces of Fortune, The Rise of the New Muslim Middle Class and What It Will Mean for Our World. Who are the new Muslim middle class?
Well, it's people whose livelihoods are connected to a private sector, who's integrated into the world economy. They're businessmen, they're financiers, they're also professionals. But they are people who are like middle classes in Asia, Latin America, people we identify as part of the new globalization forces, new economic forces. And we often don't see them in the middle class. We always think about extremists or authoritarian government or fundamentalists. We don't think about social classes in the Muslim world, the way in which they connect to economics, and why do they matter in terms of all the things that we think about the Muslim world.
You focus on Iran in this book. How diverse are the social classes in Iran?
Well, again, when we think about Iran, we don't realize that Iran actually has a fairly vibrant middle class. There's been significant amount of economic privatization in Iran in the 1980s and 1990s. It produced a middle class who's tied to economic activity in the private sector. Even though most of Iran's economy is dominated by the government, still there is a large part of the middle class that depends on private sector activity. It is that private sector and the middle class in Iran that is responsible for Iranian cinema, for cultural activity, and for demand for political freedoms and reforms. When we see Iranians take to the streets demanding better results for the elections or demanding political freedoms, these are people who also want integration into the world economy, better relations with the West. They want economic advancement. And so even the backbone of political change in Iran is the middle class.
How large is this middle class?
Well, in some countries they're larger, in some are smaller. But say in countries like Turkey, they're about maybe 20 to 30% of the population. In Pakistan or parts of the Arab world, they're about 10 to 15% of the population. Typically they're not the largest force, but the ones that account for the amount of economic dynamism, and the sector of the economy that they are most active in, which is private sector activity, is the one that is ultimately going to pull the Middle East and the Muslim world by its bootstraps and integrate it into the global economy. So it's not the issue of size, it's the issue of the pivotal role that they will play.
The West, we look at the Middle East and we think of religion, but in your book you talk a lot about capitalism and business. Can you discuss the dichotomy between religion and capitalism in the Middle East?
Well, religion and capitalism can coexist the way they do in America. You know, you have businessmen in America who are evangelical or fundamentalist or church-going. It's the same in the Muslim world as well. What makes the difference is that capitalist Muslims who are integrated in the global economy tend to favor interpretations of religion that supports their economic activities and serves their interests. In other words, they don't favor extremism because extremism is not good for business, because extremism does not interfere with their integration into global economic trends. So when we look at countries like Turkey, like Dubai, like Malaysia and Indonesia, we see middle classes that are getting enriched by global economy, that see their future and interest in global economy, are religious. But the kind of religion they follow is in some ways globalization friendly. So it's conservative, it's pious, but it supports capitalist activity and living harmoniously with others in a global economy.
What ramifications do the business class have on American foreign policy?
Well, we don't pay as much attention to them as we ought to. We don't think of the fact that what transformed China, transformed India, transformed Latin America, Eastern Europe, and Asia, that created stable, prosperous democracies, was the middle classes in those countries that were dependent on private sectors, that were integrated into the global economy. And we don't think that in the Muslim world, you're not going to get them to where Brazil, Argentina, Taiwan, or Korea are, unless the same class that got those countries to where they are also becomes empowered in the Muslim world. So we're looking for the solution in the Muslim world without looking at what is the force that's supposed to produce the solution. And I think the change agent in the Muslim world ultimately will have to come from the middle class and from the capitalist business sector associated with it.
Vali Nasr, author of Forces of Fortune. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
In his book, Scroogenomics, business professor Joel Waldfogel says that Americans waste billions of dollars on presents during the holiday season.